I'm Jason Klom, and this is Comedy on Vinyl. The year is 2025. The artist is Dick Davy. The album is Presenting Dick Davy. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to talk about an album that isn't quite out yet. Oh, actually, when I release this, who fucking knows? But with me this week is Dan Schlissel. Dan?
Hi, I'm Dan Schlissel. I run Stand Up Records. I'm fortunate enough to have been working with Jessen and Taylor and any number of other people that are on this particular podcast to get this record done and out to the public.
Taylor?
Hi, I'm Taylor Jessen. I'm archivist for Firestone Theater, Negative Land, and Duck's Breath Mystery Theater, and I guess I did some restoration on this project. Delighted to be involved.
I guess you did. Sharon?
Hi, I'm Sharon Hoffman. Dick Davy, known to me as Uncle Richard, was my uncle.
Marc?
Hi, I'm Marc Skobac. I was just a listener, and I was very taken with your first Dick Davy episode. And so I think I've just been kind of gone down the rabbit hole with you, Jason, about getting whatever documentation and history we can about Dick Davy.
We're going to talk about that more, too. And Ian?
Hey, everybody. My name is Ian Rands. I am the art director at Stand Up Records, and I was in the digital mines digging up what little information we could find visually, although Jason did a lot of groundwork on that. But yeah, we managed to flesh out a man with one known photograph into a full booklet.
Yeah, that is basically what happened. So if you haven't listened to episode 291 of Comedy on Vinyl, and there are a few subsequent ones, go listen to those. That was me trying to be a mystery show or some other podcast where there's a story for some reason. And I like it. It's good. And if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have met Sharon. I think, Sharon, this is where we should start. Tell me about what the audience might know, but tell the audience a little bit about the two records that make up half of this, or a little more than half of this record.
Okay. Well, I unearthed in my storage some records that I think must have been given by my uncle to my father, and they ended up in my hands. One of them was a demo record that he cut when he was still a folk singer and doing a lot of banter that then became the basis of his move to comedy.
And we assume that the one was recorded at the bitter end, if I'm not mistaken, and that was what he was probably flogging to different clubs. I don't know enough. I'll be honest. I don't know enough about the history of this kind of thing. I can't imagine. I mean, Taylor, you know a little bit more about the conditions of the stuff. Dan, you might be able to interject. Do we think he had just the one acetate that he's allowing to go to club by club by club? Because I don't know enough about this part of it. What are your thoughts?
Taylor, do you want to start on this, or do you want me to jump first?
Taylor, you're muted. Oh, there we go.
An acetate feels to me like it would turn to dust pretty soon.
Yeah.
After just one or two plays. Gosh. I would think there must be, if he was using this as a promotional tool, there must be a master somewhere, or at least a properly cut copy of it. I have no idea. This is me trying to sound authoritative. Passing it off to Dan.
Let me then handle the authoritative part.
Sure.
A reference acetate is usually cut in a studio. It's cut live and straight to an acetate. An acetate's meant to be played roughly 20 or less times before it kind of disintegrates. So my bet is that Dick laid this down in order to test out his material, and probably had a tape ran at the same time on a reel that he could run as many copies as he needed to. This is before cassettes, so it would have been like reel to reel that he was potentially sending out place to place. But the reference acetate was for his own personal reference.
That makes the absolute most sense. We are lucky that Taylor was able to play anything off those records. Taylor, tell me about the quality of those once you got them and what you had to do. Let's get into the nitty gritty, and feel free, audience, to be bored, but I'm going to be thrilled.
It was hard. It sounded bad. There was a lot of noise. I tried to do some things with it. I can't even remember at this point. So, like an acetate, you only really get to try and rescue it once, maybe twice, and just try and take out as many clicks as possible. that was as much as I could do, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I know of 2 other very rare acetates that are out there sitting there somewhere that people have not sort of let out into the public, and it's kind of stressing me out just knowing that who knows what'll happen if anybody ever tries to transfer them. One of them's a Bob Newhart record.
If you find them, steal them and send them to me. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, sounds good. I'll happily do that. Marc, why don't you tell me a little bit about the other half of the record, which we would not have if it weren't for you?
You're talking about the bitter end.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I'm kind of like, my second hobby is doing research and and so forth. So I guess since the episode, I was looking mainly to try and find those episodes of the Merv Griffin show that Dick Davy was on, and because we know those were preserved and were actually in that that online archive, and it would sort of make the most sense. Plus, I mean, they've been showing a lot of these shows online, and I actually found a bootleg. I don't know if you remember this, Jason. I found a bootlegger that had one of the episodes that we know Dick Davy was on, and I guess it was a syndicated copy of the episode. And so even though he was announced at the beginning of the episode, he was actually cut out of the episode. So I can't tell you how many dead ends we went down trying to find, some of you would think the more preserved episodes he was on. And I don't know if you remember this, Jason, but the Museum of Television and Radio, the Paley Center in New York, also has the Gary Moore show, which Dick Davy was ostensibly a regular on. Right. And this was network television. It ran for half a season, and they had several episodes or parts of several episodes. And so I made an appointment there, and I spent all day, and he wasn't in any of what they preserved, unfortunately. But it wasn't, neither were the rest of his repertory company, which, by the way, included Lily Tomlin and John Biner. So it was frustrating. But eventually, one of the companies that did have the Merv Griffin, I saw in their registry also listed that he was in an episode of Bitter End, which I think was like a syndicated show that was, I think, largely shown in New York.
Right.
I mean, if you look on YouTube, you can find sort of clips of musical acts, but I guess they would also have stand-up acts. And so I just sort of passed that information on to you, and I guess you sort of pled poverty and just said, hey, is there any chance you can sort of help me out and just show me this?
Yeah. And they, to their credit, in the hopes that someone would spend money down the line, we'll get to you in a minute, Dan. They did send it to me for free to preview. Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. I honestly wasn't expecting them to allow it to be used at all beyond the sort of video. Obviously, Dan, I'm not going to ask you to tell anybody about the ins and outs of that part, except for how difficult was pulling something, like difficulty-wise? How difficult was it to sort of wrangle this part of it and make it all happen as a single? And Ian, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm keeping you out, but we're going to get to that part, I swear to God.
I'm muted. I was expecting just to kind of sit back for a while.
Okay, that's fine.
So now I want to clarify a little something before we get into further. There were 2 records, one of which was recorded at the bitter end.
Correct. And then the video was also at the bitter end.
Yes.
Right.
So what we're talking about right now is the video component and not the other live record.
Mm-hmm.
So this company does a lot of licensing. They have a lot of video. They expect to make broadcast standard payments on use, because they expect that what you're getting from them is going to be put on television,
right,
which is a different level of money than what we're dealing with in the audio world.
Yeah.
We're not really dealing with broadcast, we're dealing with preservation. So it took a whole bunch of conversation, and I got them down to, it was either 20% of what they were originally asking or 10% of what they were originally asking, which was still a tremendous amount of money for what is basically 14, 15 minutes of audio.
Yeah.
But because there's so little of what Dick Davy recorded other than the 2 albums, I felt that we needed to flesh out our recording to get it to a level.
Yeah.
Plus, it fits in well with the other stuff that we have, and it gives a little bit of a personal note of Dick Davy's interaction with a club owner. In this case, the club owner of the bitter end.
Yeah.
So we negotiated, and it took forever. And they made some interesting choices that I won't get into here, but it just didn't make. It seems like they've never dealt with an audio recording before.
Right. Yeah.
So we managed to wrangle that, and through years of remastering. We took Taylor's cleaned up audio and then cleaned it up even more.
Okay.
So like there's a whole other level of preservation that happened to these recordings as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then getting the artwork and figuring out a booklet and hunting out enough information for the booklet.
Yeah.
This thing it has taken a tremendous amount of time. I think we were close to done before the pandemic started.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the pandemic caused all sorts of other crazy issues. And because of that time period where everyone in our country sort of lost their minds, it seemed like we were moving through molasses to even just make little tiny bits of progress. And even then, as we're trying to get the booklet together, Lillian passed and mysteriously or has disappeared,
right,
is more like what's happened. And we don't have access to some of the material that we would have loved to have had to flesh out the story further.
Yeah.
So this whole crazy mystery just like keeps snowballing and growing, even though we're at the point of releasing a document.
Yeah, I know. And Lillian, for those, if you're not familiar, Lillian was Dick's longtime girlfriend. They're practically married because they were together for so long. But she passed away, and we found out in just sort of a lot of texts not getting returned sort of way. It was very sad, obviously, but did, if you want to talk about logistics, complicated things a little bit. What I want to talk about... Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Have we ever found out that, in fact, she has passed for sure?
I believe so, but I don't have the details in front of me to remember, but I'm fairly certain. Sharon, maybe you can talk to this. I don't remember if you talked to somebody. I can't remember. I apologize.
I seem to recall that it got verified that she passed, but I looked, I couldn't find an obit online, but I had the same kind of, all of a sudden she vanished, and she had lived in her apartment for absolutely decades. Yeah. So if she wasn't there anymore, I think it had to mean she's not with us.
Yeah. I will say one sort of really fun note about the footage that you found, Marc, is really kind of a beautiful thing. It was okay. This is my bad. So if nobody else can get in trouble for this but me. I got that footage for free for preview, and obviously I haven't done anything commercially with it. Dan has dealt with the commercial end of it. I may or may not have shared it with Lillian because I wanted her to see it because she'd never seen Dick perform. She'd never seen him perform as Dick. He was Richard to her. She'd never seen him perform, and that was the first time she got to actually visually see him perform. And so, you know what? I mean, that's kind of a wonderful thing. I'm assuming it's the same for you, Sharon. Was that the first time you'd really seen him perform at all?
Yes, I was thrilled to see the footage. I'd only listened to his records. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everything that anybody described about him, his contemporary sort of journalists sort of fit. And the only thing, I think he's chewing gum in it, if I'm not mistaken. He used to do a thing where he would chew gum and put it on the mic stand, if I'm not mistaken. That's the way some of them described it. Dan did already bring up the liner notes, so let's talk about that. Yeah, I finished those in 2019, and then Ian, you were given liner notes, as you say, a photo or two, and then like that to go off of. And I can't wait to see him in person, but obviously the PDFs are gorgeous. But tell me about that process.
I'm quite proud of how it turned out. As somebody who's done a lot of work for record labels, and you do a lot of stuff. Like I'm working within like a 2-panel CD and then a back cover, and I was just waiting for like a nice project to come along that we could really sink my designer teeth into, and this happened to fit the bill.
Yeah.
As mentioned, there's one known photo, and this is from this book right here, The Last Laugh, and it's not even a full page. You had a scan of it, but I tracked it down on Goodreads or something. There he is, to get as good of a scan as we could, because we knew we had that. Mm-hmm. And thanks to Sharon, we had some more. That really began to flesh everything out. And you did an amazing job writing it, and it really speaks to the scarcity in your text. But but by the time it was done, it was actually pretty well fleshed out. And if you didn't know, you wouldn't know that he did not have a lot out there. Dan found a contact sheet from the Village Voice.
Yeah.
So we got some new photos from there. Newspaper.com'd the hell out of it and did a wonderful job. Found a lot of stuff. But luckily, since newspaper.com is always adding stuff in, I ended up finding a couple more things. Mm-hmm. I think I was the one who was the one who found the James Baldwin
I think
when he performed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they went to the same high school.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the more you know. Yeah, he played with Richie Havens, Ozzie Davis, and Dick Davy, of course.
Love it.
And my favorite part is it was a benefit for the Harlem Six. And of course, and all of this stuff is in the booklet. And because there's one layout, which it's all kind of like the newspaper clips and the ads of all the places he played. And he was busy. I mean, it's pretty remarkable because in the text, you speak of how he played the Apollo and how he went over really well, and that was kind of famous about it. But to actually, see and find the Apollo ad, or at least one of the times he appeared there, I thought it was great, and it really fleshed everything out. I'm extremely proud of how this turned out, and can't wait for other people to see it and enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal.
And I believe Sharon's in a photo in here, right? Is that is yeah?
Oh yeah, when I was little.
Yeah, riding on his back.
Oh yeah,
it's a great photo.
Using his hair like handlebars. It looked like
I think that might have been when he came out west to play at the Hungry Eye in San Francisco.
Okay.
Just piecing together the dates.
That's fun. Okay. I love that. Yeah, see, these are those little things. He performed just down the street from me at a piano bar that still exists somehow. Do piano bars exist? I didn't know that. But yeah, there's a bar just down the street where he performed here in Detroit. Dan, I'm curious. Actually, that's what I was going to ask you about. Can we talk then about the cover art?
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about the cover art. I will show off the booklet front cover real quick. I might forgive any glare because it's a glossy stock. It's pretty much the same as the record, but a different color. But then we have this other lovely illustration here on the back. There we go.
And maybe with the magic of post-production, we can throw this in on a PDF.
Maki's underground comic artist, Tony Millionaire, who is a roustabout and a crazy man and a wonderful illustrator.
Yeah.
So he really sank his teeth into the illustrations for this. And that gave us something to tie everything together because the actual presenting Dick Davy was his scrapbook, if I remember right.
Yep.
And it was just plain text. So there really wasn't a lot there.
Yeah.
So this allows us to put his face out there a little bit more.
That scrapbook is described in detail in Phil Berger's book, and I was like, does it still exist? And that's another thing Lillian sent me, a blurry photo, but I don't care. She sent me a blurry photo of the scrapbook, and she still had it. She sent me something from the scrapbook, which I will treasure forever. But good God, I would love to know where the rest of the damn thing is right now. I will tell you, because I'll bet there's a lot of stuff in there that you cannot find online.
Yeah.
This was sort of difficult to research, except obviously I made a little bit about myself. That makes writing a whole lot easier. But I'm curious, Taylor, I think you and I talked about this. We did. We talked about it when you got the acetates and stuff. We talked about it a little bit briefly on maybe an episode of this podcast even. I'm curious. I don't know. What did you think the first time you heard Dick Davy at all? Because I don't know when you got introduced to him.
I kind of liked it. I had no idea what to expect. And I loved the fact that it was pretty obvious within about 5 minutes of listening to it that, okay, that's not his real accent. What's going on here? But then I just really enjoyed the fact that he's just playing, he's doing an act. And the material was strong. Yeah, it made me want to know more about him. It just any research project like this instantly makes me a fan just on the basis of the idea that I can help figure out what the hell just happened.
One of my favorite things about it is, and it's still something that perplexes me to this day, but for those who don't know, he did an accent on stage that he claimed was an Arkansas accent. It's not really. It doesn't matter. It's just a generic Southern accent that he said he based off of a friend from North Carolina in the first place. And but most people sort of assumed he was, except in Phil Berger's Last Laugh, he makes it clear that he's the son of a rabbi. But no name is given, which is the big thing that challenged me. But the other thing in one of those records that Sharon found, thank goodness, is there's some Jewish material in it. That's the only time, he sings, I don't have it in front of me. It's called the Bar Mitzvah
Hava
Ranch.
Nagila.
Yes, but isn't the bit called the Bar Mitzvah Ranch, but it is done to the tune of Hava Nagila. So there is some Jewishness in it, which I was actually very happy survived, because it's nice to have that on record, if I'm honest.
Well, and the funny thing about Hava Nagila is he mispronounces some of the words on purpose,
Right.
to sound like he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Again, he was a cantor as well, so that's another thing. Like, if there's anybody who knows how to sing those songs the right way, it would have been him. Sharon, I'm curious because we again, he was something of a mystery to you too, right? Because I was asking you questions and asking you and Lillian questions, and there were some things you just couldn't answer because he wasn't around to answer them himself because he didn't talk much about his act, right?
Right. When I knew him, he had long since left that world, and he was a high school teacher. And he wrote a lot of poetry, and we had a very nice relationship, and he would send me poetry in the mail. So I knew he was a very artistic person. Those roots ran deep in him, but we didn't talk a lot about his early career.
If I will tell you, I've gotten hold of people who worked with him at school, and they still are also like, I don't really have a whole lot to say. I remember him riding a bike to school. Like, he's a mystery to, it doesn't matter who you ask, which is why I don't think I'll ever really be able to put this down. And I probably won't be able to because I'm getting help from people like Marc. Marc, I want to go back to you because you continue to send me clippings that I have never found myself. I'm curious why you're still interested in it. I know why
I got to tell you, I mean, I was hooked from Cliff's episode with you, like 10 years ago now. And then, I got the records and I really enjoyed them, for what they were. But then when you did your episode trying to figure it out, I think your first episode, I think that was around the time of like Searching for Sugarman, the movie. So it was almost like a very parallel story of, wow, like another crazy story. And I got to tell you, the more, I mean, you must agree with me, Jason. I mean, the more you peel this onion, the more fascinating it is. I mean, just when I got the record, I'm looking at the back of it. It's produced by John Hammond. I think I'm not sure, but this might be the only comedy record John Hammond ever produced. I mean, and this is the guy who discovered Bob Dylan and Billie Holiday and Robert Johnson and Bruce Springsteen, and he produced Miles Davis. So, I mean, just the fact that we're talking about the one comedian who John Hammond, put his name on as producer, I just find fascinating. Also, so it's almost everywhere you look, you just find something else even fascinating about it. And, just sort of the story that you initially that you had gone into with Cliff, just that this thing even exists, that you have this white comedian that had a black audience for this very small window during the civil rights movement where you could have something like that, where so I just find the whole thing fascinating, and the fact that he disappeared and the journey that you went on to try and figure out who he was and the leads and the threads that you're pulling. Yeah. So I feel like you and I are sort of been quilting together the sort of the history of this guy's career, and even the Bitter End taping. I mean, that is such an interesting time because I think the trail disappears pretty much right after that appearance. I mean, he does. I think he's at the Schaefer Music Festival a couple years later, and he plays a couple of shows at Baruch College, but it literally is the moment that his career just ends.
And it shifts too. It's exactly where he clearly is trying to be a hippie, and like just there's no race material in there. It's some of the same material but reframed as hippie material strictly, which honestly I appreciate. I think it's kind of it was a smart move, but it was also kind of like the right move to make at the time. And I should bring up, I'm glad you mentioned Cliff, because if it wasn't for Cliff Nesteroff, I wouldn't have known who Dick Davy was. Cliff Nesteroff, as anybody probably knows, if you're a comedy history fan, he is the comedy historian that anybody knows at this point. He's kind of a genius and writes about sometimes the more maybe quote-unquote obvious bits of comedy history and then some really incredibly obscure comedy history, and he's the one who turned me on to Dick Davy. And if it weren't for that and needing an obsession at the end of 2018, I do not think this would have happened. So I know it wouldn't have happened, so I should thank Cliff for that. But yeah, to go back to your point, yeah, I do think that this is the perfect moment, which is why in the liner notes I mentioned this is kind of a bookend of a career. There are stragglers towards the end. There's stragglers before that we don't have any evidence of, like his whole career as a folk singer. I would kill to have a recording of him just singing music, but that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Yeah, I don't know. Ian, did you know anything about this before you were handed the material?
No, and it's kind of remarkable because my dad owned a used records shop from the time I was like 5 to the time I was 17, and I've never even seen one of these albums before, which is remarkable because I mean, we were dealing with, bulk ephemera from past fads. Like, we had, if you wanted a Bob Welsh album, we could sell them to you by the pound in the mid '80s, and we had nothing Dick Davy, of course, from a different period. But I'd never seen this stuff before and was kind of blown away.
Yeah. It's like, in the whole other angle, the whole civil rights angle, which, I honestly hope, look, I think any of us who are in comedy or who love comedy and want comedy to change the world, we probably all acknowledge it's not going to, but it helps soothe wounds a little bit. But Dick Davy was doing the other end of it. He was also actively, as Richard Hoffman, he was protesting. He went to the Mississippi Summer of '64. Like, he helped teach kids probably teach kids to read. Who knows? He was a teacher. Like, I don't know if he was just playing music but an actual activist who was feet on the ground. And that's one of the things I kind of love about this. Dan, you've heard a lot of comedy, maybe all the comedy. Have you heard all the comedy?
I've not heard all the comedy.
Okay. Even close? What do we think?
I've heard a good percentage of it, but I mean, there's just saying you've heard everything is like, that's a little too much. Like, today, I'm piecing together things in this conversation that I wouldn't have pieced together. The John Hammond folk music thing is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
I already knew about the civil rights thing, but
sure,
for him to basically stop after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated is very similar to Stax Music's story down in Memphis. But and making the hippie turn after that assassination, he sort of tries to navigate the water that Von Meter did not navigate very well after Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah.
So even now, there's layers to this onion that are kind of just really appealing and interesting to me. But to get back to what you were saying, no, I've not heard all comedy, but I've heard a lot of it.
And what was your thought when did you know of Dick Davy before I/Cliff brought it up to your ears?
I'd seen a record once, I think, digging, but it didn't really strike a chord with me at the time because I was just dealing with learning the lay of the land, and there were just so many comedy records that are obscure or regional and I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't even realize that Stronger Than Dirt was an Ajax ad slogan.
Right.
And since then, that is sort of like mushroomed in my head through Doors stuff and the band The Doors, and like commercials that Large Marge is in, and all sorts of other stuff like that. So every one of these little things that we touch is some kind of crazy onion. But with Dick Davy, I did not know the material. So when I first heard it, if you don't have a picture of the guy and you just hear a digital recording and you're just hearing accents and dialects, you don't even know if he's white or black. You just know he's Southern. And when you see that, well, I don't know who this guy is, I've never seen a photo, and this thing was recorded at the Apollo, he's got to be black.
Right.
So that's how I went into hearing it the first time, was that before I read any of your description. I just fired up the recording and I was like, okay, this is funny. It's from the time period. And then you start telling me, well, he's a white guy. And I'm like, okay, so it's like a Buddy Holly situation. Okay, Buddy Holly was from the Styx too. But then you're like, no, he's the son of a rabbi. I'm like, from New York. I don't even know what to process that with. And that is what pulled me in, was all of those combinations. And the civil rights thing is very interesting because I think he was on the Nonviolent Coordinating Commission and was in the South also registering people to vote.
Yeah, I think so. I believe so. And his father famously was part of, I can't remember the name of the group, a nuclear nonproliferation group. But he was,
I don't remember either.
But huge. I mean, huge in protesting. Obviously, like, I'm actually curious, Sharon. How did that sort of activism, peace stuff trickle down into the family?
Very strongly. In fact, I can really understand why he would have gone on to do other things, because I think the core for my whole family and for him was social justice.
Yeah.
Was really being about different causes. And when I met with him when he was older, my Uncle Richard, later in life, probably the last time I saw him, it was like talking to my dad. They were so interested in the politics of the day, what was going on, wanting to make a difference, donating to causes. So that blood runs deep in my family.
And your dad was an attorney. Richard's brother was an attorney, right?
Yes, he was an attorney, but my whole childhood, we were going to political fundraisers. We were meeting all of the politicians. My parents were very active, and my dad was his whole life in different issues that mattered to him. So they were, even though their relationship fell apart at a certain point, they were so similar, really, in having that core thing about social justice.
It's interesting because I'm wondering if it's just simply two people having been born during a particular era that sort of stopped their grandfather was a rabbi, their father was a rabbi. The 60s would have been I think a critical time to sort of make a decision. Is that what I want to do, or do I want to be doing similar stuff but in a different way? I feel like.
Maybe. And he had a wife and he had a child. And so maybe it didn't make sense financially or or family wise to be on the road. I don't really know because that was sort of before my time. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the other part is so much of this is conjecture, and I'm trying not to make it that. Marc, have you discovered? I'm trying to remember. You've sent me clippings as recently as probably a couple weeks ago, so I apologize that I haven't dug through them. I'm curious what the most interesting thing that you've personally found is.
Well, I just as a concept, I just find it fascinating that this guy that no one had heard of before you sort of, figured out who he was, and the more we dug, the more that he actually had pretty large exposure. He was on, I mean, even though it was a very low rated show, to be sort of in the repertory company of the Gary Moore Show in the 1960s, you're still reaching millions of people. Yeah. So it's almost like Dick Davy was hiding in plain sight. I mean, he's on Columbia Records. He has an album produced by John Hammond, like we said. He's on network television, in front of millions of people. Yeah. He's on the Merv Griffin Show. So I just think it's fascinating. He's on bills with very famous people. So he definitely had exposure. And so to me, it's just fascinating that the more I look, the more I see that, well, he actually did a lot during this whole period of time. And what I sent you just kind of is cumulative of all the work that he did and all the, and so to sort of at one point just disappear, because then the trail really does run cold, except for a couple of dribs and drabs. So, like you said, it's conjecture, but he actually said that it was the Martin Luther King assassination that sort of changed his his direction. And I wonder if it was just heartbreak or just losing his audience and just losing his mojo for not wanting to change his audience. I mean, like, we could only guess, but sure. It's so. I guess I didn't answer your question that well in terms of one particular thing, but I just think
one. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of the more I look, the more fascinating, like I said, the story becomes, because we're sort of filling in the dates of where he was and where he played. Mm-hmm. And look, there's probably lots of comedians who have been forgotten over time, but like you and Cliff said on the podcast, a lot of them didn't have record deals, a lot of them weren't on television. And he was, and you got to wonder, if he had kept, and he's clearly very talented. If he had kept at it, he's somebody that people would have seen and recognized. So it's just a fascinating story, just to wonder what happened.
Yeah.
This is all totally conjectural, but I mean, if you're somebody who has an agent, which obviously he did, you have a thumbnail of who you are, and if your thumbnail is, well, I pretend to be a Southern idiot who is making people laugh about his point of view. There it comes a moment right after the Martin Luther King assassination where you're just not going to get any bookings off of that anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's perfectly fair. And right up until sort of that moment, like, you want to talk about exposure, one of my favorite things I found and have not dug through all of yet is I now have dozens of hours of him on guesting on WBAI shows in New York. I don't think there's any material on there necessarily, but it is him sticking to the accent, but talking so seriously about the issues. Like, he's just like, you can hear, like... The New Yorker wants to come out, but he will not give it up. And he's just talking seriously about the issues of 1966, 67 New York, everything that's going on. He is like pretty clearly like almost a flower child. Like, he's clearly like, he loves peace and he just wants people to get along. He's also a little old-fashioned American. There's a little bit of that sort of anti-communist thing, but like not jingoistic. He's a fascinating guy, and again, sort of, at least to New Yorkers, he would have been a familiar voice. So that's another sort of tick to Mark's point, is that he was out there, but without the internet to save him, like what's going to happen at a certain point. Dan, well, actually, let's do this. Does anybody have anything because I don't know that I have any intelligent questions left. I would love to just hear if anybody's got any final thoughts on it. And then Dan, we'll talk to you in a moment about the sort of final package of it.
All right.
Anybody? I left it open.
I'm thrilled that this has been so well fleshed out. I mean, so much work, and even though there are going to be limits to it, no matter what, I'm proud of the work that all of us have put into this, because I mean, it really, sometimes you're just kind of pushing something out and you're like, it's a product, people will love it. Yeah. But this is kind of doing something different. This is kind of shining a light on somebody who the light should have stayed. Well, it's unfortunate and it's tragic that he, stepped away for political reasons that make a lot of sense today. But I mean, it's too bad that then any sort of memory got snuffed out with him. I mean, it's one thing to kind of stop performing, but for it just to kind of all evaporate right around the same time is pretty tragic.
And I will say this, if it weren't for Sharon's father, Daniel has passed away within the last couple of years, but if it wasn't for him responding to me from where he was living, and if it wasn't for the person at the front desk actually forwarding my stuff, giving me like an address or whatever, I would have gotten zero confirmation, and none of this would have happened either. So, I mean, as you say, I know you said they had a bit of a falling out, but he seemed perfectly proud and happy to talk to me when he did, by that point, by 2018. So I think that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Oh, yeah. He definitely wanted to help you out, Jason, any way he could. He sent you to me. I'm sorry I haven't been more help, but I will say that even though there's a mystery around him and his comedy, I will say that in my family, this was such an act of bravery. He was really an outlier because my family was all about being intellectual, not doing social justice through artistry, and he was not recognized for that in my family. Mm-hmm. My grandfather nor my father ever saw him perform, and it just makes me sad to think that he wasn't recognized within our family for what he did.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing in the world. Like, that you bringing that up is like, much as I might talk about, were they disappointed that he didn't become a rabbi? They didn't do this? He did. Very specifically, I think what you just said obviously speaks to the family attitude, which is not an unusual attitude in a lot of families, unfortunately. But you know what? If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have these records, so we wouldn't be at least rectifying a smidge, I think. So
actually, it's all of you. I'm in awe, and I know my uncle would just be in awe that his work from back then not only has this life breathed into it by all of you, but that listening to it now, it's sadly still relevant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No getting around that.
The thing is, the artist is often the black sheep of the family because they're not following a traditional thing or a safe thing. Yeah. And, with Dick or Richard being a comedian and then going into teaching, neither one of those is safe or secure or a guaranteed future. But what he did was he helped try and shape people's thoughts. And that is, you cannot put a value to that. You can't, because I listen to this stuff and I find it charming and from a different time, but also amazingly relevant because so much of it hasn't changed, which is a sad state of affairs of our nation. And that we're trying to regress to a point that's prior to even the social justice that he was pushing himself directly is an indictment of how far we've stayed the same and want to regress further back. Yeah, I just can't thank him enough for what he did at that time and what your preservation, Sharon, and Lillian's has allowed us to continue to document at this late stage in the game.
I agree. Well, I think that's a hell of a place to leave it. We'll do a separate section here at some point. I'll do a little bit of thing after this once we have a date in place. But I wanted to thank everybody for joining me, and thank you so much. This is a lot of hard work for everybody, least of all me. Everybody has worked so freaking hard on this thing, and it really means a lot to me that this little search that I used to counteract some depression came to something. So it's I don't know. It's very nice. It's very pleasing to me. So I want to just, you know what? Before we go then, does anybody have anything they want to promote? I would actually love to give people a chance to promote something if they want, because, if you got something coming out that you want people to know about or where they can find you, hit me with it.
Always new Fire Sign Theater reissues coming. Go to their Bandcamp site. That's all I got.
There you go.
I'll promote standuprecords.com. All social media is at Stand Up Records. We're promoting Dick Davy's final album, this retro recap of his career that we're doing now, and many other fine releases by some of the funniest people in America.
Anybody else?
And you can find me at SharonHoffmanLiving.com, where I guide people to their wisdom. I'm really focused on personal transformation through speaking, writing, and coaching.
I love that. And Mark?
You can find me going to the supermarket in about 20 minutes. About all I got. I got nothing to promote.
Yeah, I guess the next rabbit hole I got to go down is, I have, I guess, maybe the only signed copy of Stronger Than Dirt in America, but it's to an Allen. So maybe someday I'll will it to an Allen. It's actually to Alan, one of the sweetest guys around, is how he dedicated it. So maybe someday we'll find out who Alan was.
That is remarkable. You know what? Look, go to jasonklom.com, where once this album is available, I will also obviously be advertising it there. But in the meantime, since this is out, that means the record is probably out. So please enjoy. Go to standuprecords.com. And as always, have a good thing. Comedy on Vinyl is a production of Stolen Dress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Worden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klom. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. You can email us at podcast@comedyonvinyl.com. Subscribe to Comedy on Vinyl on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps. You can find everything in one place at comedyonvinyl.com. A major portion of Comedy on Vinyl has been underwritten by Stand Up Records. Please visit standuprecords.com for all your comedy needs, and tune in to the new Stand Up Records channel available on the Roku, where you can also find select episodes of this podcast. Comedy Podcast Cloud.
Hey, it's my turn.
I'm English.